So thank you both for joining us tonight, and we will continue our conversations about Chapter 8 in the JEWEL Ornament of Liberation, the chapter on refuge and the precepts. So we'll be, of course, recording this for those who can't be here tonight, and so if anybody has any comments or questions, don't hesitate to write an email, and we will certainly get back to you as quickly as we can. So we begin with our opening prayers, the short opening prayers tonight, the short refuge, and the four immeasurables. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chonamla, shangju bardu dagni kapsuchi, dagi jinsoki pe sonamgi, drola penshir sangye juparsho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yampe sem chen tam she dewa dang dewe gudang dempa jorchi. Dug now dang da now gi gu dang drawar jorchi. Dug now me pe de wa dang mi drawar jorchi. Ne ring jag dang ni dang drawe tang nam la ne par jorchi. Okay, thank you. Before we do begin, does anybody have any comments or questions about anything that we've talked about thus far? Last week we talked about the 100-syllable mantra, purification mantra of Vajrasattva. Anybody have any comments or questions about that? Okay. All right, well, very good. Well, then I'm going to be using the outline book. And so today we're looking at the antidote to not knowing the method of practice. So at some point, we're studying all this and learning all about all the 5 poisons and the 6 of these and the 7 of those and the 4 of those and the 10 of these and everything. But then we say, well, how do we practice this? What is the practice? How do I make this mine? How do I become liberated? How do I become a practitioner, a yogi, a bodhisattva, and a Buddha? How do I do that? So this is the antidote to not knowing the method of practice for achieving Buddhahood. So this is the refuge and precepts. So what is refuge? So here is a very concise, complete explanation for that. And it says, refuge is a special method, a joyful path of freeing ourselves from samsara and attaining enlightenment. As earlier chapters mentioned, All sentient beings are permeated by Buddha nature, yet, failing to recognize that, they remain bewildered in samsara on the wheel of cause and suffering. The sufferings of individual experiences are like the ocean's waves endlessly washing up, one after another. As long as you remain in samsara, don't expect complete peace and happiness. Refuge is the path to freedom from this cycle. So let's have a discussion about this. Based on what I just said and based on your own experience, because both of you have now had years of experience, what does refuge mean to you? Kunga?
I've heard refuge described as where you go to find support, where you go to form your perspective on the world. And so, so the way I think of this is that, when we're younger, we take refuge in our parents. The parents are our guides. They kind of tell us the way things are and how things are working in the world. And then as we get older, we start to take refuge in what we learned at school and what our friends are doing, what our friends say, and maybe what we learn from our own experience. And then I think when I came to the Buddhist path, then it became, my refuge became, what were the Buddhist teachings on these different things? What was the Buddhist perspective on the world? How does the world work according to Buddhism? And then that became, where I went to figure out how I would interact with the world, how I would think about things, what made my life meaningful. I guess those are the kind of things that refuge means to me.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Zara, can you comment? What has refuge meant to you, and maybe how has refuge changed for you? What refuge is? How has it changed for you from the time that you first began learning about the Dharma and where you are today?
Um, hmm, I'm gonna be, I'll just be very candid with both you and Kunga. I really didn't understand any of that, like other than the literal like refuge, the experiential part until starting the fivefold program and doing that part of the like that 3 months with Drupal, like the teachings, where he talked about it, like really what it means um to take refuge from not just like understanding it in your brain intellectually, but the whole experience. And I'm talking even referentially my entire life, even with Abrahamic religions, like in Islam or Christianity, right? Like, because you could take refuge in that as well, like in those teachings. But I didn't even understand because I just was born into that culturally and was like, okay, on Fridays you go to the mosque, on Sundays you go to church. I didn't understand how that means I'm taking refuge holistically. So I'm kind of in on complete candor, Lance and Kunga. It's as a concept linking to experience, like full body experience. It's new to me, like linking the concept as an intellectual term into the Buddha's teachings, which are my pathway. That's really all I can say. Now I understand it. Now I'm experiencing it.
Well, thank you. Do you think that taking refuge is we're taking refuge in a system, and that is uh, trying to be helpful for us to understand who we are as human beings and how it is that we can perfect ourselves for the benefit of all beings and so on. So, have you looked at it in that kind of light?
If that's for me, yes. So everything has for me shifted once I understood. I like it's like an umbrella for me, like this like rain, a shield, a protection shield. Once I just like kind of going back to um the eightfold path, right? Like right view, um, like in right resolve, the first two. And yeah, like I finally am like, oh, like it's blind faith. You just go into it and you take refuge without 100% knowing what's going to happen other than you believe in the system is going to make things better collectively. So yes, I do. That is how I understand it now. It's like I just do the 10 skillful actions, the virtuous actions, and I stay away from non-virtuous now, and I make amends and go to Vajrasattva and confess what I've done non-virtuously, like my samayas stuff. Like I understand all that now. Like I need to go through those steps every day to basically heal myself, heal my spiritual children. So I have taken refuge in this process, as you said, because I want to reach enlightenment. So yes, I have.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So Kunga, let me ask you, if you can comment on that, but also can you comment on refuge from the different traditions, whether it's a Buddhist tradition or it's a Islamic tradition, a Christian tradition, or a Jewish tradition, Hindu tradition. They have an element of refuge in each of their teachings and so on. And at some point, they kind of ask for some kind of exclusivity, that this is the path and you're going to eschew any others. What do you think of that? What are your comments on this refuge?
Well, I think that makes me think of an image where this says, if you wanna find the water, it's better to dig one deep well than a bunch of little shallow ones. And sometimes experimenting in a lot of different spiritual paths can be like thinking of like digging a lot of little shallow wells. You don't really create a strong foundation because you're dabbling here and dabbling there, and when things get tough, you don't really know where to go. So I agree that that select. I don't know if I think that Buddhism teaches us as well that you should select one path and deepen your understanding of that as much as possible, and not be constantly moving around when something, because I think the tendency might be that if you're moving around, that you find something that is more difficult to understand, and then you just kind of give it up and move on to something else. Where if you've decided to really build a foundation with one path, it gives you more discipline in sticking with it, even in there's maybe difficult areas, maybe things are difficult to understand. Yeah.
Was that an easy decision for you? Had you, in your background, had you felt as though you took some kind of refuge in another tradition and have moved into other traditions and finally maybe now the Buddhism?
I was practicing Catholicism with my spouse, but and I still attend mass with her every Sunday, but I never wanted to be a Catholic. I never felt called to take refuge in Catholicism. But the more I learned about Buddhism, I definitely felt like that was my interest, that was my calling. So, and since I've taken that path, I haven't felt, um, I don't find um, that it's been a problem for me. I mean, I don't think about, other religions as being interesting. And, but I don't feel like I can't practice, other religions at a limited way. Like I still go to Catholic service, and I still find value in those rituals, even though I don't consider myself completely a Catholic. And I wouldn't say that maybe Buddhism is for everyone, but I think I feel more in common sometimes with people who are very devoted to other religions, even if they're not Buddhism, than I do with people who are not devoted to a spiritual path, you know. So I think that's something interesting.
Lance, I want to, Kunga, to that point, Lance, may I make one comment to
Sure,
Kunga's?
please, go
Yeah,
ahead.
Kunga, that's interesting. Your last sentence that you just said, I have had the same exact experience. I find it doesn't matter if they're, Jewish, Catholic, Islamic, a truly grounded person in their whatever their relative scripture is, they understand the transcendence and collectiveness, that the interconnectedness of all scriptures, rather, regardless of their, let's say, formal, conventional religious orientation, they understand the interconnectedness of the meaning of the scripture. Almost like it's like sages from different continents, if that makes sense. Like they get it. And that's, I think I have found that so remarkable, where like I've just had these aha moments where someone's saying something about the Bible, a very devout person, but I'm like, I connect with them more than I would someone who's calling themselves Buddhist, but doing it very superficially. So I love that you just pointed that out. So thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I tend to think of it, in terms of there's a sophistication of the intellect in each of these different traditions. And depending on your level of sophistication, which one, really speaks to you and so on. There's a validity because they're all talking about love, they're all talking about compassion, they're all talking about joy, and they're all talking about equanimity. They're all talking about bodhicitta in their own terms, but how to recognize that and what those terms are and how you live that, that's where there's a lot of difference and where the sophistication comes in and so on. So for me, I like the analogy that Kunga used when he said, is it better to dig one deep hole rather than a bunch of little holes that don't hold much water or be able to find much information in those little holes, but the one deep hole might yield a better result and so on. So I think that's a good analogy. So the thing that we're looking for, is to understand the self. Buddhism is not a religion. It's not talking about a spiritual being. It's not talking about a supreme being by any means. But what it's doing, it's introducing you to your own self and seeing how you are consumed by that self. And as a result, we imprison ourselves in all these mental objects and things that we go through, rather than freeing ourselves, liberating ourselves to be able to enjoy what some of these traditions might be calling a heaven or some kind of a blissful existence, or to be with God or with a supreme being and so on. So that's a huge difference, I think, between the Buddhism and most all these other traditions that we've talked about, is that this is a philosophy of the self, and that we are either our own worst enemies or that we become our liberators. So, Kunga, what do you think?
Yes, I don't think that my I'm most familiar with Christianity, and the focus is completely on the divinity, and living a life so that is a reflection of the divinity and faith in the divinity. So it's very different than Buddhism, which doesn't have a creator God as part of their faith. Um, I think that when you look at the more like practical teachings, maybe the precepts, such as do not harm other beings, do not steal, do not lie. There's a lot of similarities between the practice of Buddhism and what that looks like in everyday life outside of the temple or outside of church. Being charitable, donating to others, Jesus' teachings about turning the other cheek. Those things are a lot more similar. It's just that that belief about why you should do these things, is very different. Where I think Buddhism is very much recognizing that there's this distinction between ourselves and others. It's just a delusion. So, treating others as we ourselves wish to be treated is, is going to be one that's the most compassionate path, because that's how we want to be treated, compassionately, with love and equanimity and so on. And I think that there's, the deeper you go into Christianity and spirituality, it becomes very much, closer when you think about, all beings are, an emanation of God. They've all been sort of created by God. You would, say if when beings God, they go be united with God. So on a surface level, all those beings on earth, even though they look very different, they're all, created from the same God substance. They all have this same connection. And we teach about that in Buddhism too, how we're all kind of interconnected, and we have come from the same source, sort of. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Zara, can you comment? What do you think?
I apologize. I think I've lost focus on what specific aspect do you want me to comment on, really relative to the different religions?
Well, I guess, just the point that the main difference I see is the sophistication of the Buddhist path in terms of, being able to identify, what the self is, who we are
Oh, yeah.
as human beings. And the other traditions are all based on, all seem to be at least, a supreme being, and that we need to be able to glorify and be subservient to the supreme being, and through the beneficence of the supreme being, we will receive whatever it is that we need.
Oh, yes. And it reminds me of, I do agree with what you're saying. It reminds me of like conversations people have about free will versus destiny, right? Like that idea. And I think the Buddhist scriptures and essentially prescription is, it puts the choice, yeah, sure, certain things which we'll call our karma push us into certain causes and conditions. But however, your free will is, do you want to level up and change it? And here's how. And I think that's where Buddhism really stands out, aside from other scriptures, is it gives you that opportunity to make a different choice by educating you on specific behaviors, the 10 that are skillful and 10 that are not skillful, to make a different choice. So I don't think there's that level of sophistication I have seen in other religions where it's that straightforward. It's like stepping on a scale where you see the number. You don't need to be surprised anymore. The abstractness of it is gone, and the accountability becomes slightly free will. Balance between free will and destiny, I think, is best in Buddhism, where there's your causes and conditions are your destiny, if you will. Your free will is your like becoming skillful, and I think Buddhism does it the best, at least in my humble opinion. That's my perspective on it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm going to move on to this next sentence in the book here, and it says that refuge embodies the complete teachings of the Buddha, and this is refuge in the ground, the path, and the fruition. So the complete teaching, so all the canon, all the different teachings and so on that were orally transmitted from the Buddha to his disciples and so on, and were memorized at the time because they didn't have a written language, and they were memorized, and the monastics questioned each other, challenged each other as to their remembrance of what the teachings were. And so this process, it seems like it would kind of purify what I remembered, and then Kunga would remember, well, I remember the Buddha said it this way, and Zara would say, no, I remember he said it more this way, and then we would come to a consensus, and that became, part of the doctrine, and at some point got written down and carried on and so on. So the refuge is taking refuge in the literal scripture, but it's also, what's not being said here, is in the actual practice, the transformation of what is being transmitted, what is being taught in the scripture, to say that I become the embodiment of that Buddha nature. I recognize myself as Buddha nature, and I have that experience. It's not that I'm speaking vicariously about what so-and-so said and what I've interpreted that to be, but this is the way I experienced it in a very profound way and so on. So, Kunga, what do you think about that?
Um, yeah, I think I agree that that the over time the practice of the religion, the practice of Buddhism has become more of a how I actually experience the world and not so much just what I've read about the way things should be. Um, I think that I've noticed, well, I mean some of the basic things like interdependence and impermanence, I think those are easier to see. But I think that as I've been practicing longer, I just had more experience that seemed to verify that the way things work. Um,
Has it led you to any kind of transcendence or transformative, change in your life? And if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to. But I just wonder about that. What is the practice? What are we practicing? Are we
yeah, I
practicing
think
the
it
transformation?
hasn't. I don't think it's been any kind of event or experience, where like, oh, all of a sudden now I feel oneness, like some type of experience you might have if you take some type of intoxicants. But I think that in general, it just made my whole life more meaningful. Um, and everything in my life basically revolves around spiritual practice. So, I mean, it started gradually. When I went to decide to go back to school and become a social worker, and then when I decided to take a job in hospice, um, and then just reaching out to different people in the community to further my practice, meeting up with different groups like the Shambhala meditation group that I stayed with for a while, and the group that I had here in St. Joe, and the group that I've been working with in Grand Rapids. Um, I feel like other than family, the majority of my friends are people that are on the spiritual path, people that I've gotten to know through the spiritual path. Um, since my wife shares a lot of the same interests, our activities, even our more leisure activities, revolve around these ideas, not feeling like we need to, take a lot of fancy vacations, but thinking about taking vacations where it's more calm and relaxing, um, trying to spend time when we're together in things that are meaningful, not just spend time on. Sorry, my dog is being very um, attentive today. Not usually like that, like all over here. Um,
Maybe it's just
but
luck.
yeah, so it's been more of a gradual thing, It's been more of I don't know. He's looking for something. I don't know what he's looking for. He's like all over looking for something.
He's
Um,
looking for the Dharma.
yeah, looking for the Dharma. Um, But yeah, for me, it hasn't been like some big event or anything. It's just been sort of a gradually accumulation of things over my life where I feel I'm very satisfied with the direction of my life and with my day-to-day activities because I feel like Buddhism is making things very meaningful for me.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Zara, what's your comment? Talking about transformative experience or transcendence or however you want to call it, or has it been at this point, as it continues to be a gradual accumulation like Kunga just said? What do you think?
Um, and I'm still like writing things down, because for me everything is like witnessing a testimony right now. I'm not nearly as sophisticated as as you'd be able to describe this, and Kunga, you have such a way with describing these situations. I'm still in a state of awe with, oh my goodness, this karma thing is real. It's not just a buzzword. Like, even though it's like 6 years in, where I'm very truly dedicated to and have the discipline. So I have these moments where I'm like, wait, did that just happen? Like, correlating the use of skillful behavior. And then I call them ripple effects. I'm like, I always tell people a smile can change so many people's lives. Even when you're having a bad day, just smile as an action of the body, right? And it's like 5 minutes later, something positive happens for you. Like someone does, it's just this correlation. And when you see it, like Kunga just alluded to, like the skillful of thought, body, speech, all three pathways, it's there. It's always there. It's available to every single person if you are wanting to have that view. And then it doesn't have to be a sufferfest. So I don't know if I'm really answering the question correctly, because I still have moments of, oh my goodness, this Buddhism thing is real and works. It really works. My life is so much better. I don't know if I'm answering the question well, so I apologize.
No, it's quite all right. It's fine. And the here in this sentence it said, that we take refuge in the ground, the path, and the fruition. So do you see that kind of structure?
Oh, Lance, yes, absolutely. So it's all coming together, and it's like, now I understand it as like I've done things in previous probably vessels or bodies to get to even be able to speak to you, and Kunga is a blessing, and I recognize that this is a blessing, this Zoom meeting, and anyone who hears this. But yes, absolutely. I see now you have to be able to go through the process of saying what you've done, the non-virtue. You have to own up to it. Then you have to prepare yourself to say, I'm going to do better. I'm going to try better in the next action through body, speech, and mind. And then, yes, that works. Absolutely. So you have to say how you've broken and been unskillful. You have to acknowledge it, and then say what you're going to do differently, and work towards that. And it has to be for the benefit of the collective well-being.
So
Sarah just answered just on the.
and it's all
Yeah.
a matter of what? What would you say? It's a matter of what? Observance or choice? What?
Yeah, it's a choice. Faith. It's blind faith. I made a decision several years, probably just 2 years ago, where I understood it's easy to do these behaviors just to gain a higher level within the six realms. So which you've alluded to in previous teachings, like God realm, or the jealous God realm, or even human. I can see why people do these behaviors just because they want to, for the I, the singular. I made a distinct decision 2 years ago to do collective well-being. Like, everything is for the benefit of others, and I am in the other. But it's no longer just for Sarah as the I. So that was the decision of blind faith I made 2 years ago. Everything has to be for everybody's well-being, before just mine. That was a decision. So I don't know. You were asking, I think, about discipline or maybe resolve or view. I'm not sure, but yes.
Well, the thing that I'm trying to point to is that there's a structure. There's the Buddha
Yeah.
teachings, but then it all comes down to a basic structure of,
Yes.
here we are. We want to get to some place, figuratively, and there's a pathway for us to get to that place. And then when we get there, we find out that it's the same place we were in the very beginning. That the result is just a better awareness of what the ground was when we started out.
Okay.
And taking a refuge in that, having faith in that, and that becomes the skeleton on which this is, the frame on which this all hangs.
Yes. Lance and Kunga, have you heard of the phrase? And I used to make fun of people for saying this, but now I understand it from people who are from Christianity, where they genuinely mean it when they say, let go, let God, or Jesus can take the wheel. That's some version of them saying, go seek refuge in that scripture. Just hand it over and just do the right behaviors under that scripture. I used to make fun of that, but now I understand it through the Buddhist teachings. You have to just do it and know that it's going to be okay.
Well,
Without,
I think it's an interesting point, and I want to ask you this:
yeah.
do you think that there is a suspension or a transferring of responsibility in one tradition over another?
You mean to like the higher entity of the abstract version of what we call God?
Well, yeah. I mean, what you just said, that let
Yeah.
God, let go, let God,
Um,
or something to
yeah,
that effect.
yes, actually, yes, because
And
and
we
yes,
say, and in Buddhism, we say, change your mind.
yeah, yes. That's good. I didn't know that about Buddhism. And Islam, Lance and Kunga, there's something they say that says inshallah, which means God willing. So when people like really want something, they'll say this phrase, inshallah, which means if God wills it. And I always tell people, I say, don't say that. If you want it, go after it. Start taking the action and start thinking positively for that and do the behaviors.
So you
Um,
see the responsibility, the individual
yes,
responsibility.
yes. When I hear that's so funny that you just said that because I didn't make that link, but I do feel like, for lack of a better word, there's also a way to use that as laziness, not to take accountability for your actions, your skillful actions. When you hand it over completely without understanding, when you say that, you're saying, I'm just going to follow the scriptures. I'm going to take the actions and the scriptures I follow, but I'm going to still take the actions versus being indifferent or lazy. Yes.
Gunga, you have any comment about that?
I don't think that for me, when I hear that phrase, I don't think of that as giving up responsibility for your actions. I think of as acknowledging that you cannot control everything that's going on in the world. Um, and you know that
Well, we're not. I think that's important. Are we talking about the world, or are we talking about ourselves? What is our field of control, I guess would be one way of putting it.
Mhm. Well, I think our field of control, this is what I believe, is our perspective that we bring to the world. And that perspective really changes how we experience the world, right? I was just listening to some Buddhist talk today about this idea that seeing all the good things that happen to you in your life as gifts of the Lama, and all the challenges or difficulties in your life as purifying practices, things that that are being presented by the Lama for you to work your way through to purify yourself based on some maybe past experience or old karmas you need to work through. And I kind of think of that statement, that it's in God's hands, is in a way similar to that, and that, instead of the person is saying that these when I have things that happen in my life that are good, well, that is, those not my fault. It's just the environment has sort of conspired, and I'm getting these blessings, maybe, and they probably would say because of my faith. And then when things that are difficult are happening, well, God's being testing my faith, testing my resolve, even though I'm in this difficult situation, am I going to give up my spiritual path? I feel like that's what when I hear that from Christians, that's the sense I'm getting from them, is they're seeing everything through the lens of their path, and that path, sees this creator God as providing everything into them as a way of developing them spiritually. So I see it very similar to the way that a Buddhist might see that, but we would, instead of saying, God is maybe putting that in front of us to purify us, we might say that our karma is sort of bringing these things into our path, and our past actions or misactions are creating this current experience, and how we respond to that experience is going to create the kind of life we have going forward. So we have the opportunity, the choice to develop our spiritual path by responding to these obstacles in a way in line with our spiritual beliefs, or we could, throw our spiritual beliefs to the wind and just act in the same way that anybody else might, by getting mad and, getting angry and blaming someone. And I think it's the same thing when I hear Christians say that, that's what I think they're saying. I think they're saying the similar type thing. They're saying, this is an opportunity for my deepen my faith, you know, or this is an opportunity for me to just act like everybody else who acts in the secular world and just get mad and get angry and do whatever, complain and, all those things. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I think we're going to let it hang there for a little bit, and we'll come back to this many times, whether we do it today or not. But I want to continue the conversation now, move it along a little bit, and say that there is a ground refuge, there is a path refuge, and there is a fruition refuge. So to be able to discern this is part of the process, the sophistication of the Dharma. So understanding this is important. So here it says, the ground refuge is the primordially unfabricated nature, the mode of abiding, the way the whole of reality is constituted free from confusion. The interdependent nature is the absolute wisdom which pervades all phenomena in samsara and nirvana without duality. Nothing is hidden. All universes are obvious. There is no need for speculation. There is nothing to be investigated. So this to me, to start the conversation, this to me, speaks of a supreme notion, if not a supreme being. But then there is this, inconceivable, ineffable, unexplainable, energy that we are part of, but at the same time, we can't articulate. We can't say exactly what it is. And this is the ground. This is the ground on which we stand. And from that, we move onward. What do you think of that, Kunga?
Yeah, I like that definition. It reminds me of the Shin Ming where they talk about they try and talk about what's not you can't talk about. So they talk about, the Dharma being beyond concept, beyond ideas about good and bad, right and wrong. And so I think that the path that we have is the way we travel on the ground. The ground really can't be communicated. We can't pin it down because it's non-dualistic, it's non-conceptual. But that we've been given this path, the Eightfold Path to follow. And the way I think of it is that, following the path, recognizing the path as the fruition, as the goal, at the same time you're practicing it is really the most important thing. The ground, is I guess the closest we can get to the ground is just experiencing the path. Just non-conceptually experiencing it, just experiencing it through our experience.
Well, I just want to ask you this. It says, nothing is hidden. All universes are obvious. There is no need for speculation. There is nothing to be investigated. So does this mean to you that there is a inherent, say, a purity to it? And I know purity is a relative word.
About impurity, right? So if we talk about purity and impurity, we're talking dualism again.
Right.
Ready.
But from that, springs forth, all this phenomenal nature, all this dualistic stuff, because that comes from the absolute, comes from this notion of the ineffable, of the unexplainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the way the Buddha taught the Eightfold Path was this sort of path of purity, a path of helping others, a path of compassion. And so it seems like that all those actions seem to relate well with that idea of purity, but they can only happen because the impurity is there, right? We can't be generous unless there's people who need to receive our generosity. We can't be compassionate unless there's people that are suffering. So the two are kind of tied together in our dualistic world.
Thank you. So Zara, do you have a sense of that connection to that which cannot be explained to ourselves or to anyone else? And that from that, issues forth this life that we lead, with all of its dualism and myriad ways of accomplishing, accumulating, and our lifestyles and so on.
And I apologize because I'm driving and I'm trying to make sure I want to follow the specific pointed question. I am sorry. I yes, I think I do. And I do. It goes back to me just having blind faith at this point in everything that I'm doing for refuge, and taking the precepts or the things I'm practicing right now. And yes, I do believe in the connectedness and what I can't see or have evidence of happening. I don't know if that's what you're literally asking.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you had pulled on the side of the road and you were taking notes and you weren't driving, but
No, that's okay. No, I'm fine. I'm on Bluetooth, but I want to contribute meaningfully to the conversation still.
yeah, and I don't want you to risk your mind being pulled away from that immediate task that you have.
True.
All right. Well, let's move on to the book a little bit more. It says the Dharmakaya. So in this ground, we need to look at the Dharmakaya, we need to look at the Sambhogagaya, and we need to look at the Nirmanakaya. So just to refresh everybody's memory and to, standardize the terms, so to speak, that the Dharmakaya is the truth body. This is that ineffable, non-dual, non-conceptual, inexpressible body of the Buddha, of which we are part of being awakened. So if we're not awakened, we don't necessarily recognize the Dharmakaya. But if we have some degree of awakenedness, we'll appreciate that there's something that we're all a part of, but we can't say what it is. So that's the Dharmakaya. The Sambhogagaya is really a display of the wisdom of the Dharmakaya in order that it manifests so that ordinary beings can begin to comprehend, can begin to be on a path of understanding, what that Dharmakaya is. So in this Sambhogagaya, this is the subtle enjoyment body of the intellectualization of all of this. So this is what the gift of Shakyamuni Buddha was to be able to intellectualize, to be able to communicate, to be able to I can't think of the word now, to be able to speak, about what this meditational state is, and giving symbols, giving representations in anthropomorphic ways of what this energy is and this meditation mind and so on. So this was an invention of the Buddha, of Shakyamuni Buddha, that has been carried on and carried on and carried on and so on. But it is a technique of the phenomenal nature. To understand that better, in other words, so that can be left for beings to meet the Buddha, to be able to recognize the virtue from themselves, and they begin to identify, they begin to recognize that enjoyment body because of their accumulations, because of their their purity and so on. But for the rest of us, we need to be shown what that is. So the Nirmanakaya is the emanation of that oneness, of that non-duality, is the emanation of that, the emanation body of the teacher, of the Buddha, of the Guru, of those who come to articulate, that's the word I was looking for, to articulate that Sambhogagaya nature that we have, that Sambhogagaya Buddha, to point it out to us, because we need that degree of here it is, you need to be looking at this and understand this. And from that, you'll be understanding more about the Sambhogagaya, and ultimately it will lead to your being able to have an experience of the pure nature of the Dharmakaya, of the truth body. So I'm sorry if that went on too much, but I wanted to be able to have a frame of conversation about the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogagaya, and the Nirmanakaya, because this is the ground on which we are standing, the ground on which we are sitting, on the ground on which our meditation takes place. So, Kunga, would you please respond?
Yeah, so if to sum my own words, this is what I think you're saying. The Dharmakaya is the part of the Buddhist experience that's beyond conceptual mind, so beyond what our mind of duality can fathom. And we might say that our higher spiritual experiences, maybe higher states of meditation, touch on those experiences of the Dharmakaya. And the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, is those use of I think of it as like those use of those meditation deities and different guru yogas to embody the part of the Buddhist practice that's not conceptual, to make it conceptual, in a way that we can, because we're human beings, it's easier for us to relate to practical things. When we take these concepts like compassion and loving kindness, and we identify them into a being, a symbolic being, and think of that being as these different attributes sort of solidified in their pure form, and then give an image to that, and attach to that image different actions and different prayers. That gives us a way that we can communicate with that a sense of Dharmakaya that's beyond a regular conceptual thought. It gives us kind of a pathway to talk about that. And then the Dharmakaya is this sort of more specific images of the Buddha through the teacher or through the guru, or maybe even just images of the Buddha in statues and things like that. But also the Buddha as historical Shakyamuni Buddha, that we can kind of relate to as a historical figure, as a founder of Buddhism, that type of thing. So I don't know, does that sound like I'm on the right track there?
Yeah, absolutely. And that our teachers, that we regard our Dharma teachers as being the emanation of the Buddha, being the emanation of the Nirmanakaya, and sometimes their personalities might get in the way. Sometimes our personality gets in the way, and we might misinterpret what they say, or think that they're not doing it quite right, or we're not listening quite right. And so what's important for us is to be really listening and paying attention to the heart speech, to the heart mind. What's coming into the heart? What loving kindness is coming in? What compassion is coming in? What joy is coming in? What equanimity is coming in? Despite the words and the way that master may be trying to articulate that. But the one thing that we can count on, at least in the Buddhism, is there is a sincere and deep, profound technique or aspiration to be able to make it as pure a transmission as possible. And that we should be recognizing and allowing that to come into our heart.
Yeah, and maybe we could also extend that vision to everyone we encounter. Not just the people that it's easy to see as our Buddhist teachers, but just anybody we encounter on the street, to see that person as a spiritual teacher, as a Buddha for us. To see, whether you're seeing their suffering, the suffering that's kind of spilling out over, or you're really seeing them as a bodhisattva who's really doing some amazing, things with compassion and generosity. They may not be a Buddhist per se, or maybe even religious per se, but just looking to people as aspects of those actions. I think that can be a way to see that too.
Well, that's the point. I think what you just said is the point I was going to say, that, what we're looking at in that situation is we're looking at their karma, and whether, how we're going to allow that to affect us and so on, and whether we can, engage with them, as a result of that karma or so on. But we certainly can't, I don't think we can, look at the public at large, as you will, as you would the Vajra master who's sitting in front of you in a Dharma center environment, and we need to be able to have discriminating awareness to what we allow ourselves to engage in, the thought that we allow us to engage in. I think there needs to be some control, some qualification and so on. Yes, we can see that karma, and that karma can speak to us, as to, what we're doing, what they're doing, and so on like that. We can analyze that, but I don't look at it, I can see the potential, but I don't look at it that they are indeed, the Buddha or an enlightened being or anything like that. I don't think that's what you meant.
No, it was more along the lines of seeing it's like what you said, you're kind of seeing your karma too. I mean, you're seeing what your karma is presented here for you to see. But you're someone might be demonstrating all the unwholesome qualities, and that's what you're recognizing, but recognizing that where those unwholesome qualities are coming from, that
So you
they're
get to
not.
practice your wisdom, you get to practice your forgiveness, your compassion, all
Yeah,
those things.
yeah. I mean, every single person is an example of your Buddhist path. When you see that person, you don't, just like some. I'm not going to talk about other faiths, but so I'll just talk about Buddhism. You're going to, when I see someone who's doing a lot of unwholesome things, I I don't think, oh, this person is a horrible person. I try to think about what causes them to act in these ways. Why are they acting this way? Because they want the same thing I do. They want to be happy and they want to relieve suffering. The way they come about it is completely the opposite of what would be helpful for them. But just understanding that, then it helps you to see, this is why we practice, so we don't respond this way, that this person is responding to adversity. We can see all the negative things happening, all the causes and conditions being generated by their actions. And then that makes you feel, I think, more sympathy for their humanness, when you see that, and you don't you don't see a self there. You don't see a self there who's just a bad self. You just realize that person has been created by all these causes and conditions, going back to their childhood and maybe to their parents and maybe even beyond that.
Right.
Yeah.
Zara, I'd like you to comment, but first I want to read these definitions of Dharmakaya, Samagrikaya, and Nirmanakaya, and maybe help focus, our discussion a little bit better. So here in the Dharmakaya, it says, the basis of all Buddha qualities and manifestations, which embody unconditional, all-pervading compassion and primordial wisdom. I'm going to repeat it. The basis of all Buddha's qualities and manifestations, and if we replace the word Buddha with awakened one, the basis of all the awakened qualities and manifestations which embody unconditional, all-pervading compassion and primordial wisdom. So this wisdom that we have within ourselves that is been covered up, that is misinterpreted and so on, but yet is present in all beings. It's present everywhere. This unconditioned, all-pervading compassion and primordial wisdom. From this state, free from elaborations, Buddha benefits all sentient beings. So the function of the awakened one is like the sun to radiate its energy, its light, its wisdom, its bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings with no explanation needed, no expectation of anything coming back to it. It's just what it does. The Sambhogakaya is Buddha's manifestation of a celestial form body. So it's the awakened one's manifestation of a celestial form body to benefit advanced bodhisattvas. So in other words, it's that the meditational deities. It's the stuff of the brain, of the mind, that is creating, these illusory kind of things that, we're trying to maintain a purity about. It starts off as purity, and we're using that as a yardstick, if you will, to be able to look at the relative things that can be measured by this purity and this intellectual purity. So this is the enjoyment body. This is going through this process. And then the last thing was the Nirmanakaya. It says the Buddha manifests, the awakened one manifests the emanation form body for ordinary practitioners. So in other words, it's able to manifest that energy into a form body. Everything up to this was a formless body. Now it manifests into a form body. It's kind of like Star Trek when they're transporting themselves from one place to another. They break up the materialization and then they reassemble the materialization someplace else. So that might be a coarse analogy, but it's something like that. So, Zara, what comments do you have about that?
Thank you, Lance, for the summary of the three different kayas. I mean, I guess I agree with the categorization of those experientially and also intellectually. It makes sense. So that you can, I think it's prescriptive, so you kind of can help yourself identify how everything is interconnected within your own I guess, which would be the form body, the last one you just described, the Sambhogakaya. I think it helps. I think it helps individually if you understand these three different vessels and also relative to the six realms, the formless realms, in the God realms and stuff, so you can understand where you may be and where there's opportunity for growth and such. But I agree with the categorization. I don't know if you needed me to make more comments on it.
How do you think this squares with the Nunjo practices that you are engaged in?
In the Fivefold Mahamudra program specifically, like the Fivefold Path?
Well, the Nunjo in particular.
Okay. Just for clarification, because I know we're recording this, could you be specific on what you mean, like which specific practices?
Well, all of them, and at this point, I know that the ones that you've been engaged in has been the refuge practice, And now,
Right.
and I'm not sure exactly where you are, if you're in the
Vajra,
purification, if you're in
yeah,
the
I'm doing
purification
Vajrasattva.
practice.
Yeah, I'm doing Vajrasattva now. Yeah.
But that purification has to do with behavior,
Correct.
but it also has to do with knowledge.
Yes. Correct.
And the refuge, the refuge nandro, has to do with being a refuge practitioner, being in this lineage, and what it means to be in the lineage. So everything that we've been talking about is part of that. And so being able to be conversant in this and so on, and not so much to me personally, but I'm just saying that for us to be able to understand what it is that we're doing to get to the fivefold path of Mahamudra, we have to go through this process of clarifying through the nundro. And so what we don't know, we need to investigate. What we think we know, we need to prove, and so on. So it's a process by which we are testing ourselves. You know, in the monasteries, they are always having debates. And
Yeah.
in some way, we're having a bit of a debate. You know, it's not aimed at that way, but, you know, we're each giving our point of view and so on. And we're not being critical about it. We're accepting each other's point of view. However, you know, in the monastery, there would be more of a strict, you know, oh well, this is what the Dharma says. This is the way it should be. This is the way you should think about it. And if another teacher thinks of it another way, you can quote that, but you better get your facts right. You know, it's that kind of a thing. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the things that we're talking about are fundamental basis of understanding what it is to be a Dharma practitioner. So, just simply that.
Okay.
How does
Yeah.
that land with you? What do you think of that?
Yeah. So the practices I'm doing right now, relative to the different vehicles that the Dharmakaya, the Nirmanakaya, and Sambhogakaya are all, yes, necessary in order to work on all three of those vehicles, those vessels. Yes. So I see that they are necessary behaviors and actions, and a spiritual developmental process, if you will, Lance. It's a developmental process you have to go through, and you have these, like you're more advanced than Kunga and I. Kunga's more advanced than I am, but we all have to go through these levels of awakenings. But you have to do the work. You have to do, like you just said, the behaviors that you can measure and see, and they're prescribed very nicely in the Nundro, for lay practitioners or people who want to take it to more advanced, like through the fivefold Mahamudra. If you are working in that direction towards enlightenment with clarity, then you can go that pathway. But yes, I do think all underneath the concept of like refuge, which is what we're talking about. You can take refuge as a lay practitioner, as a more advanced practitioner, as a monastic. It's all of those are fluid in a way, but yes, I do think that all those things are helpful. Yeah.
What do you think of my statement that, you know, the purification practice, the Vajrasattva purification practice, is not just behavior, but it's of wisdom?
It's like, because you said something about like knowing what you don't know, being prepared to speak to what you are going to say about whatever it is you want to comment on Dharma. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I agree. In fact, the wisest person I think in the room is the one who's listening the most, speaking the less, the fewest. But at least that's not always true. But and the person who scares me the most is the one who thinks, is when they believe they know, but they don't have the skills to admit what they don't know. That's the scariest person in the room, is the one who thinks they do know it all and can't actually identify what they maybe really don't know. So And I think that's probably humility, right? Where you even you probably, Lance, have to have points of humility where you say, maybe I don't know. I need to consult with someone more advanced even than me, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think you're correct about that. And I would agree. You have to, even for me in the line of work I do, and probably for Kunga in his social work field, he has to consult with other people, like peer review. Like you and I are all talking. I'm talking with Matt Christian, for example, as an equal peer for me, maybe about our experiences. But I think it's just a peer review process, a check and balance.
And, not to put too fine a point on it or grind this point too much, but, if we were in a 5-year or a 3-year, the traditional, excuse me, 3-year retreat in a monastery environment, that the first year or so, we would be involved just in the nunjo, just in the preliminary, this is called the uncommon preliminary practice to the fivefold path of Mahamudra. So we would be, working on this every single day, 5-6 sessions a day, to be doing these practices, but also to be doing study and research and meditation at the same time or during those days and so on. So it's not exclusively, doing just the practice reciting the mantras and so on. It's actually, you got books with you, you got study. The other thing that you have is you have the retreat master who comes to visit. However often is decided by the retreat master and the retreatant, whether it's once a day, whether it's once a week, whether it's once a month, or something like that. And it's the retreat master's job to engage in conversation with the retreatant, to find out what their progress is, to find out what questions they have, and so on, and so to validate, their doubts, what's going on, and so on like that. So I don't know how that's being approached, with the program that you're in, but I'm just pointing out to you that to engage in this and to is a vital form, I think, a vital aspect of the Nunjo process.
You mean like to have like these check-ins where you have someone more advanced than you, making sure you're going forth in the right direction?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's sort of like the apprentice model where you have, that's how you learn, right? Whatever your craft is, whether it's Buddhism or learning how to be a doctor, that's how it used to be. You would study under a master for years to get good at something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it's not, and if in our situation, because we're part of this far-flung sangha, that we don't have the ability to be able to speak with somebody as quickly as we like to, we may have to initiate it ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a sign of progress to say, what, I need to have this conversation. One of my spiritual friends has pointed this out to me, and maybe I need to expand into this and make this happen in one way or another. Maybe it's having a weekly or bi-weekly conversation on Zoom with Drupon or something like that. He's only a phone call away, or maybe it's another spiritual friend or something like that. To get as much benefit out of the process that you're engaged in.
Yeah. I think that's I think that's best practices. I know in the work I do, when you're a student, you check in with your supervisor on a certain frequency to make sure you're doing the techniques correctly, like whatever the skill is you're working on. That to me is logical and makes sense. Yeah.
So this is part of the path. That's part of the path. The path is the path of refinement, is the path of purification, the path of embellishing or understanding more of your knowledge. The wisdom is the combination of all this knowledge of your experience as well as the book learning and everything that you do, plus your own personal experience and everything leads to the wisdom. But to be able to enhance our knowledge of what is going on, what the terms are, so that we understand it intellectually better. So the path of refuge is this path of engaging in that, the refinement. So here it says in the text, it says, therefore we take refuge in the Buddha mind, in the awakened mind. We take refuge in that. We may not achieve it, but we're taking refuge in it. This becomes my home base. This is where I want to go. I take refuge in the mind. We take refuge in the speech of the Buddha, the intellectualization, the activities of the Buddha. We take refuge in that while we're on the path. And the Sangha, the body of the Buddha, in order to study and practice. So the body of the Buddha means that your body, you are becoming the embodiment of this accumulated wisdom, knowledge, activities, experience, and so on, like that. You're becoming the embodiment of that, and you're making yourself available to the other elements of the body, meaning the Sangha, your spiritual friends, your spiritual teachers, and so on, like that. It goes on, so then it says, in order to study and practice. So by this we begin to follow the path of purification of different types of obscurations, and we gather the two accumulations. This is the path refuge. So what are the two accumulations? The two accumulations are loving kindness and compassion. But another way of speaking of both of those things is saying loving kindness is wisdom, and compassion is method or skillful means. So this is the path of refuge. It's not just reciting the mantra 100,000 times or 111,111 times. It's not just that. It's knowing, the knowledge base of what all this is and opening yourself up to experience. You could be having experience every day of this whole process. So I hope I'm not grinding the point, but I'm trying to remind. Gunga, you have any thought about this?
You talked about that. I mean, there's a lot of teachings that, this moment we have right now, this moment of conversing is the only moment, that there is. The past is just a memory. The future has not yet come, and it never will come. And the past will always be a memory. So the only time you can practice is right now. And if you're not practicing your spiritual path, what are you practicing? So you can only, you always have to practice it now in this moment. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's an opportunity for your spiritual practice, or it's an opportunity for distraction, I guess.
But it's also doing research, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is trying to expand the knowledge base.
Sure. Yeah, you said that, the speech of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha. I think that the teachings are, giving you that bigger view, that bigger perspective, so that you can turn more of your daily life into Dharma. You don't have to say, well, I'm not at the temple today, so I can't really practice, or I couldn't sit on my meditation cushion, I can't really practice, or I'm driving in the car, so I can't really practice. I mean, the more you learn, then you learn to apply different strategies. Like when I'm driving the car, in the mornings to patient visits, I always spend my time in the beginning for the first couple of visits just doing different recitations that I put to memory. The invocation names of the bodhisattvas, different things that we use in our bodhisattva class, just to set myself in the right mind frame for my visits. but but that's all dependent on the teachings, right? I had to learn those are memorizations. I had to memorize them. I had to put towards work towards that. I had to decide which ones to use and why they were important, which ones would be meaningful for me. So there's all that part of it too.
Yes. Zara, would you like to comment? Do you have any thoughts about it?
I for purification, specifically the purification practices. Lance, is that what you're for what Kunga just said? Bringing everything onto the path.
Yes. Everything
Oh
comes
yeah.
into the path. Yes.
Oh yeah. It's so funny because I used to think, oh, it's the more formal things we think about, which is like sitting on the cushion, doing the recitation, lighting the incense, having like a 15 to 30 minute, and then like it's like, okay, then go back to your regular life. And now everything's changed. Everything is the path. Every moment is the path. There's no discontinuity for me. Everything is the Dharma, little d, and everything is me practicing the big Dharma every single second between body, speech, and mind. There's no break in it anymore.
So it's literally become a lifestyle now.
Yeah, like there's no moment where I'm not thinking about, like, if I come across a piece of trash, I pick it up. I don't even think about, oh, who did that? I just like, oh, this is great. I get to pick up a piece of trash and put it in the trash can and recycle it. I don't even think about it. I don't have negative thoughts about it. I'm just like, oh, great. I get to help the earth. Or someone's flicked me off because I forgot to use my signal or something. And they flick me off and cuts me out. And I just smile and wave. And I'm like, I hope the person has a better day. Everything's the path. Every single second is an action for skillful me and opportunity. Everything. Even this conversation we're having right now.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about the mundane thing of picking up some trash. There's a great film called For the Benefit of All Beings, which is a biography of a documentary of Gyaltshen Rinpoche, and as he's being followed about by the filmographer, and they're asking him stuff and everything, and they're just following to see his normal day, and he's outside and he's walking into the temple, and he passes by where all the shoes are strewn about, from all the people who have come and are inside the temple, and there's no order to them at all. And he just stops what he's doing, and he takes every one of the pairs of shoes and he pairs them up and he puts them in lines and so on to make them look neat and everything. So to me that's an example of picking up the trash and everything, and it's just a matter of having a control in your life of being able to see things being in order and so on like that. So. When you said that, that made me think of Gyaltshen Rinpoche.
That's very cute. I could see doing that. That's very sweet. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So we just have a little bit of time. I'm going to finish this one paragraph here. But it says, by following the path with persistence and with full confidence and devotion, one actualizes the result. The Dharmakaya, that which embodies the complete Dharma teachings and is the perfection state of the Sangha. That's the result. The Dharmakaya, that which embodies the complete Dharma teachings and is the perfection state of the Sangha. This is called the fruition refuge. In other words, to say, I got this vision, I got this aspiration, I got this motivation to be able to recognize all this as Dharmakaya and as the unspeakable Dharmakaya, but at the same time, I've got this path and I've got this mode of being able to recognize the emanation of this to help guide me to be able to get to the point of the Dharmakaya. So it may seem to be common sense. But the point is, of course, that we were there the whole time. We just didn't appreciate all the nuance, all the things that we've been talking about. Today, we just kind of gloss over things and not pay attention to these things. But these are the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the philosophy, of the practice, of thinking in these terms, doing these things in these terms.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then we've come to the end of the hour and a half. So I want to continue this next time because I think it's very important. We haven't gotten to the pratimoksha vows and so on yet, but we'll get there. And okay. Does anybody have any closing comments?
No.
Nope.
Okay. Has it been helpful to you?
Yes.
I always need a little affirmation.
You're doing a great job.
Yes, Lance. For me, the repetition is helping me immensely. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Drikungpa Ratnasri and all the other great masters who are omniscient, lords of the Dharma, masters of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well,
Thank you. See you next week.
see you soon.
See you guys next week. Okay, bye.
Bye.